I just want to welcome everybody. Um, MRES is kind of at a little different time. I mean, the next major event we have is tabling in the spring and solar boat regatta and that kind of thing. So not too much on the announcement side of things. And I'm really excited to have Bryan here. Bryan Wood is the executive director of Osprey Wilds Environmental Learning Center, and he's been there for a while, and he's one of my heroes in the sense that he's done so much with solar, especially lately, which he's going to try to share with us tonight, some of that, and tell us more about the. And Bryan, be sure and tell people what the original name of the place was, because maybe some people will remember it by that name too.
Yeah, I absolutely will.
All right. Well, let's get started, and you feel free to expound on your experiences and stuff a little bit more if you want to.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and thanks to Doug for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I know that this time of year is busy with lots of fall activities and the election coming up, but I appreciate you carving out some time to join us tonight. It's my privilege to be able to share what's been happening with our organization in terms of really clean energy over the last really 20 years. It's been a journey that we've been on, and we're not done. But we've had some exciting breakthroughs recently that I'll be talking about. And then I also want to just give you a little bit of information about our organization uh, as a whole. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. And just a little background on myself. My name's Bryan Wood. I'm executive director at Osprey Wilds, and I've been in that role since 2009. And I actually got my start there as an intern, finishing my undergraduate degree at University of Minnesota Duluth back in 2005. And so I've gotten to wear lots of hats through the organization, which I've enjoyed, and I really enjoy my role now, which has the opportunity to hopefully impact the organization in a positive way in a lot of different ways. So, Osprey Wilds, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're what's called a residential environmental learning center. So, that really means we're like a nature center, but we have overnight residential capacities. So, we have lodging, we have dining services, and when groups come to us, they're usually coming for multiple days. And that really allows that immersive experience to happen. We are an accredited school, so we are an accredited K-12 school through Cognia. We have been teaching college field courses for 40 plus years. We also rent out our facilities for conferences and retreats for places like Fresh Energy or Climate Generation or MRES. We authorize charter schools. Some of you might know us from our previous name, which was the Audubon Center of the North Woods. We
Right.
made that change in 2020, um, and there wasn't any negative connotation with Audubon, but it just was a little confusing for people to understand our role and our mission, and that we were a standalone 501c3. Um, so we made that change, but our mission, our focus, our work, all of that remains the same. And we serve a lot of people. Every year, we touch about 15,000 people through our programs. Uh, and that's our campus in Sandstone, and that's Grindstone Lake. We have about 4,000 feet of shoreline. You can see some of our solar arrays down there, and there's a wind turbine as well. Our big dining hall and dormitory. We have about 780 contiguous acres, and we also have a 560-acre campus up by Moose Lake. And our genesis really ties back to the Schweitzer family. This is the historic Schweitzer Lodge, and our existence is owed to the generosity of Marguerite Schweitzer, who grew up spending time here with her family. And when she passed away, she bequeathed the property to the National Audubon Society. Um, we ended up becoming our own separate nonprofit, and launching into our own mission and eventually getting the deed back. But that Schweitzer Lodge, that was their summer home, and we use that today. We have groups in there every week, and it's a beautiful spot. Um, these are our two main campus buildings, which have a lot of renewable energy and energy efficiency upgrades that I will talk about. Um, and I'll just mention that I'm looking forward to questions through this presentation. My thought would be I'll go through sharing what I was planning on, and then I'll stop at 6:45 or earlier, and we can open it up to whatever questions people have. So if you have something, hold on to that, and hopefully we can have a good conversation about that. That's another look at our campus where we host lots of schools and groups every year. We also have a wildlife barn with educational ambassador animals, so raptors as well as mammals and reptiles and amphibians. And a big part of who we are is an outdoor school. And think of an outdoor school as a school, but that the classroom is outside. And there are a handful of outdoor schools in Minnesota where the primary business model is that we're hosting schools and students multiple days at a time throughout the school year from September to June, as well as some summer visits. And every year at Osprey Wilds, we are connecting about 3,000 K-12 students from around 80 schools across the state to nature. And we are really proud of that. And we feel that is so vital moving ahead for our planet's health, for the climate, for the mental, emotional, and physical health of kids to get that connection and that experience in nature and start learning about their role and all the neat, amazing things that nature provides and that you can learn about. One of the things we've really been working on is trying to make this as accessible as possible. So we've been providing scholarships over the years to be able to fund any school that needs that help. And we have about 40 classes that schools can pick from. So when teachers sign up, there's an array of offerings that they can select and year round. And those focus on sciences, wildlife, outdoor skills, adventure courses. We have climbing wall and high ropes course and archery range and canoeing. We also teach classes on energy and conservation and agriculture, cultural history, a lot of character and team building, and we align our curriculum as much as possible to state and next generation science standards so that teachers can make sure that they're feeling like this is a value added, that when they come, they're not missing out on what they're trying to accomplish, but that this is actually helping them accomplish their education goals. We are fortunate to be in the process of year 3 of 3 with a Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund grant to support schools to come. I'm very happy to say that over the last 2 years, no school that's wanted to come and needed financial assistance was denied that, and they were all able to come. And we are in the running to get another grant to provide even more scholarships come July 1st. So any of you that might have a connection to a school that they're not going anywhere, we would definitely love to talk with them and share this opportunity. And if that works for their academic goals and logistics, we could hopefully make that happen and get more kids connected to the outdoors. Something else that we've been working on to try to get kids outdoors is legislation at the state capitol. So last year, we made a concerted effort to get legislation introduced, both Democratic and Republican. So there are actually 4 bills that were mirrored Republican bills with Democratic bills. We had 69 authors, almost a 50-50 split, which is really unheard of in recent memory. And what we find is that getting kids outdoors is not a partisan thing. Everybody understands the value of getting kids outside And what we would hope to do and accomplish is to get legislation and funding passed to allow every student in Minnesota to get that kind of outdoor school experience for multiple days where they're in nature. That was needed, I think, before COVID, but since COVID, we've really had some shifts societally in how people and kids spend their time and the amount of screen time that happens, as well as financial challenges for schools where maybe field trips are not as viable as they used to be. So, working on that, we got the legislation introduced. It didn't pass, but we are committed and excited about this next full legislative session to hopefully get that passed and implemented where we think it makes a lot of sense for a state like Minnesota that prides itself on our natural resources and our opportunities for the outdoors with kids to have this as a basic thing that every student could get. Because right now, about 70% of Minnesota students aren't getting this kind of experience. So we're going to be working hard at that this coming legislative session, and you might hear about it, and you can check out our website, Outdoor School for All, if you would like to find out more. We also offer college programs through community colleges as well as Hamline University and their graduate degree and certificate program, as well as a J-term course. And over those courses in a year, we usually reach a couple hundred students from schools across the country. We get a lot of students coming from all over the U.S. for our January interim course, coming in the dead of winter to brave the temperatures and snow. And that's kind of the allure for some people to get that experience and learn about wildlife tracking and wolf ecology and get up to northern Minnesota and see that firsthand. We also authorize charter schools. So by number of schools, we are the largest authorizer of charter schools in the state of Minnesota with 36 schools. And amongst those schools, they're nearly 10,000 students. And that ranges from Grand Portage and Grand Marais down to La Crescent, over to Starbuck and Hutchinson and Bemidji and Red Lake and everywhere in between. So very diverse geographically, very diverse in terms of the demographics of the students, where 2/3 are students of color, 2/3 are qualifying for free and reduced price meals, a quarter of them are English language learners, and nearly a fifth have special education needs. So we really serve a wide swath of students in schools. And the thing that really makes our work unique nationwide is that when schools are authorized by us, we require environmental education to happen in their schools. That doesn't mean they have to come to Osprey Wilds. There's a lot of ways that students can get environmental education, but one way or another, we want to ensure that that happens, and that is a requisite for being authorized by us. And we're the only authorizer in the country that requires that. So that's a way we can really further our mission to a wide number of students, and we're really excited about that work. We also offer programs for families and individuals. So we have a winter family weekend every President's Day weekend with lots of fun outside and indoor activities. And we're very close to Robinson Park, which is the old sandstone quarry in Sandstone. And that's one of the things we do. Lots of other things. We also provide summer youth camps, and all of those camps are pay what you can, thanks to Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund grant, where we can provide funding assistance. So lots of good options for kids to get outside. And then it's important for adults to learn too. So we offer a lot of adult programs, including women's wellness weekends, lots of Rhodes Scholar programs, which used to be called Elder Hostel, but Rhodes Scholar. And some of those Rhodes Scholar programs go down southeast Minnesota looking at wildflowers and bird migration. There's a intergenerational one for grandparents and grandkids, and one that explores the North Shore and Ely and Voyageurs National Park. So those are some offerings for adults. and then do lots of community programs as well. So dinners at the lake where we have different speakers. The guy holding the giant lake trout, he's the Lake Superior fisheries manager for the DNR. So that we have lots of interesting speakers on that. We have different skills workshops, maple syrup day, where you can learn about that whole process and have a fun pancake brunch, volunteer weekends, um, and lots of other things.
Hey, Brian, can I interrupt just for a sec? Could you go back 2 slides? I'm curious what that photograph is. One more.
Yeah,
Yeah, the photograph with the little rock path walking out to the island.
yeah.
What's the story there?
That's Mallard Island, home where Ernest Oberholzer lived for about 70 years on Rainy Lake. And
Oh, okay.
it's a little stone bridge that goes across to Japanese House, which was one of the several buildings he had constructed on his little island there. So it's just west of Voyageurs National Park.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. It looks really beautiful.
It
Never been
is.
there, obviously. Okay.
Yeah, Ernest Oberholzer is one of those conservation heroes, not as well known as Sigurd Olson or
Figured
Ole,
Olson. Yeah. Yeah.
but without him, the border country would be 30 feet underwater from Edward Backus's dams. So we're very grateful for his work. One of the things we're doing to help with climate is to grow more of our food on site. So we serve about 50,000 meals per year, and we are shifting to try to grow as much as we can on site. And so that is our trap farm. It's a regenerative agriculture farm where we're building soil health and improving wildlife habitat, retaining water, and producing really nutrient dense food. So we have outside vegetable plots. That's Beth Dooley, very well known cookbook author and cook that's checked out our farm. Um, so we grow lots of veggies that are the basis of a lot of our meals on site. We have hoop houses where we can extend the growing season, um, broiler chickens, grass-fed beef, um, and so trying to just expand that and show the relationship that agriculture has with climate change and how we can sequester carbon by not tilling the soil and by um, building soil health, having living roots in the ground at all time, and reducing the mileage that we're transporting our food in. That's Commissioner Tom Peterson there, second to the left, who's a Pine County resident and big fan of our farm. We've also gotten a lot of certifications and endorsements from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for that. So it's an exciting venture that we just finished our 4th growing season. Another thing that we feel is important is just protecting the land so that it's not subdivided. You know, if something happened to Osprey Wilds 100, 200 years from now, we want to make sure our legacy of conservation remains intact. So 2 years ago, we completed a 460-acre conservation easement with the Minnesota Land Trust, which protected 85% of the initial property bequest of Marguerite Schweitzer. And then we were also fortunate to get Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment funds to purchase some land that was up for sale on our borders and protect that forever as well. So that feels really good to know that that land will continue to be wild and forested and sequestering carbon indefinitely. And then right before we get into our energy, I'll just mention that we have a fundraiser week coming up where we have an online auction, virtual speakers, and then that should be November 3rd, not November 9th, afternoon social at Urban Growler to come by and learn about what we do. And if you feel so inclined, support us. So there's some info there. I know this will go out so people can take a look. But I did want to mention, we want to thank teachers. Teachers are so important to society and have a really challenging job, very important job. And we want to recognize them. So if you know a teacher or you are a teacher, you want to come by, you'll get a free pint on us for the event. So that's a little bit about our organization. And now I want to talk about our clean energy journey. So as we do all of this environmental education, we really feel that part of that is walking the talk. It's not enough to just take people out into a prairie or the woods and teach them about what those are and all the intricacies of that. But it's important that we're minimizing our impact negatively to the planet. And, that's from the products we use, that's how we treat the land, that's the energy that we consume. And so looking at our energy, we really take a three-pronged approach. How can we conserve energy so we use less of it by practices, by behavior changes? How can we make things more efficient so that we're not having as much waste? And then how can we start shifting the sources of that to stuff that's on site as opposed to distributed and from sources that might be emitting carbon? And that's been a process for us. And when those buildings that you're seeing were built in 1997, they were not efficient buildings at all. They were actually, if you're looking at an Energy Star rating, they were below 50. They were below average. So for us and for all of our buildings, it's really been a reclamation retrofitting model. We didn't start off with the fanciest, most efficient buildings. It's been a process to continue to chip away at it. And for a lot of people in their homes, that's probably more of a similar approach too, where you're not starting out with a net zero home. And so over the years, we've been able to make some big changes and big strides. And I would say that, 1997, those two buildings you saw, they opened, they were heated with propane. And so for the next 7 years, we were burning a lot of propane. But in 2004, we got a housing and urban development grant from the federal government to put in a 65-ton ground source geothermal heat pump to operate both buildings. So that allowed us to remove all of our propane tanks for heating and shift to that. And from there, we've just continued to add as we could along the way. So the next year, 2005, we added 8.4 kW of solar. That same year, we added a couple of solar hot water panels, which were actually made in Starbuck, Minnesota by Solar Skies to do heating. Some of you sounds like Solar Skies.
Oh, yeah.
The next year, we were able to get a grant to put in a small wind turbine, which is a little bit taller than our forest. We got a grant to do lighting upgrades and shift to ballastless LEDs, which has been a big energy savings. 2011, we made a lot of upgrades, and that was thanks to funding from then Congressman Oberstar and from Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. And that allowed us to put in almost 25 kW of solar, 27 solar hot water panels for domestic use. We added 8 inches of blown cellulose insulation into all 5 of our main buildings to really improve the R value, as well as putting a new roof and styrofoam insulation around our 103-year-old barn. We also then looked at efficiency and conservation, so upgrading our HVAC controls so that we had different zones that we could adjust the temperature in every dorm room, every component to our building, our 2 main buildings, so that we could have unoccupied and occupied mode, and put in variable speed drives for our geothermal pumps so that they were cycling and not having all 4 of them running at the same time. Next couple of years, we added solar again, and then did another HVAC upgrade. So with the 2 main buildings, if you can see my little cursor, there's the geothermal field buried under the grass here. It's a 65-ton system. There's 36 closed loop vertical wells. They each go down 206 feet, and it's going through a lot of sandstone bedrock. But that's deep enough to, get rid of that heat that's coming off of the buildings, cool off, get back to that ambient ground temp, come back into this building, providing heating and cooling needs for our dining hall and then also for our dormitory. So that one system operates both of those buildings. We added 22 solar hot water panels on the southwest side of our dormitory. So when you're looking at that, those are supplying almost all the hot water needs for our dormitories. We have a capacity of 112 people for that dormitory, and that's 14 dorm rooms. So 14 showers, 28 sinks, a lot of hot water usage, in the morning when kids are getting up and at night when they're going to bed, taking showers, brushing teeth, things like that. So that made a big reduction in our propane usage. When we put those in, we dropped our propane usage by about 70%. So those solar hot water panels supply the bulk of the needs there. And then for our kitchen, our commercial kitchen, as well as the public bathrooms, we have 7 solar hot water panels on our dining hall that provide the bulk of the hot water needs for our dining and cooking. On the barn, that barn was actually built in 1911. And we were able to, what we did was we left the old siding on and all of the kind of piecemeal fiberglass insulation that was behind it, and we just made the barn bigger. So we added styrofoam sheets of insulation that were 4 inches thick. We put down a peel and stick vapor barrier. We added new siding over that. And then on the roof, we scraped off the shingles and did the same thing. So everything got about 4 inches wider on the barn, a lot tighter. And that barn, was never intended to do what it does now, which is house a climbing wall and education space. But that's been a process from the 100 years to now to get that to where it is. In the process, we also cut out windows to have more passive solar. And just from an aesthetic standpoint, it's so much nicer to be in that loft, to have that sun beaming in, which this is facing due south. And then the solar hot air panel, which is made in Pine River by Real. And so that supplies hot air, supplemental heat for our climbing wall, which is in our old hayloft up here. In 2005, we ventured into solar photovoltaics. So these are dual tracking arrays made by BP. Each of the panels there are 160 watts. So that total is about 8.4 kilowatts. And, that's a pretty similar size of production to what a typical Minnesota house would need for electricity, which is kind of a coincidence. It was based more on what our grant fund could get us, but that's made for a good teaching tool. So those are dual tracking. They move following the sun, and then they adjust to the sun's angle throughout the seasons. In 2011, we added 6 more dual tracking arrays. These are by Samsung. Those are 240 watt panels, and that's about 24 kilowatts total. So those are tracking also. And then in 2015, we added 10K solar panels out of Bloomington, and they have those reflective panels that increase the efficiency of the panels up into the 20s, and that supplies electricity to our barn there in the background. We've also, besides the solar hot water panels, we added tankless water heaters. So when the sun's not doing everything we need to, then we can zap that water up without heating a large reserve tank and using less carbon, less propane. So we've actually shifted so that every water heater on our campus now is a tankless water heater. This is an energy brochure that if you go onto our website, you can see just building by building the various things we've done, which includes low flow aerators, low flow shower heads, lighting upgrades, smart thermostats, things like that. So we want to make it easy for people to see what we've done, and if that strikes an idea for them that maybe they can look into it, that's our hope. We want to be an education and a demonstration site for people. So with all of those improvements, we are still using about 300,000 kilowatt hours of electricity through all of our buildings. And we've had a goal in our current strategic plan to produce 100% of our electricity on site. And so that's been a task that we've been working on. Going back to 2019, we had been working on some models of about 248 kW across the campus on different meters. And we were going to finance that with a loan. And it just didn't, the numbers didn't work with what we would have overproduced in the cost savings and then what we would have had to cover with the loan. And so that project ended up not happening. And then COVID hit. And so everything kind of shifted to just staying alive as an organization. So a couple years ago, I reached back out to our utility electric cooperative, East Central Energy, which is a cooperative and subsidiary of Great River Energy. And I said, we're still interested in this. Let's see if there's a way we can make this work. And so, we were discussing and trying to come up with ideas and, with the net metering and how many meters we had and probably what, we're going to be way over the 40 kW. What we arrived at was that for this to work probably with as big a system as we need, then we would probably need to go with a power purchase agreement. And so we would put together an RFP, state what kind of size system range we were looking for, and then see what we got. And so we decided to try that out. So working with East Central Energy to draft that RFP. And we had a perfect site for it. We have a prairie right as you drive in that is clear to the south, and so that would be the location of it. One complicating factor is that prairie, we put a conservation easement on, which I mentioned a little bit ago, and I had put a 3-acre exclusion in that to be big enough for a 250 kW system, which would be 100% of our needs, and that's how big I was thinking. But with the power purchase agreement and the RFP, East Central Energy was really saying, if you want this viable, companies are gonna be looking for bigger projects, 1, 2, 5 megawatt projects, and that 3-acre exclusion was a limiting factor on it. It can't get bigger than what fits there, and so it was, about a 600, 700 kilowatt system was about as big as it would get. So we looked for anticipation of the results coming in, and we got 3 back. None of them were close enough for East Central Energy's purchasing on what they would be covering and then what we would be buying at. So that was kind of disappointing. The company that was closest, it's called Soltech, and their CEO, Sean Markham, just really kept us in mind and was really, what we were trying to do resonated with him, and the way that this could touch thousands of people a year. First thing they see driving in, that we can share the story of clean energy and solar, and that it's different than something that might be out in a agricultural field that people see, but there might not be the education component to it, where this is, we thought, was really exciting. So we worked with Sean. He put together a proposal to submit to Renewable Energy in America grant program, the REAP program. To do that, we needed to do a land lease agreement and get that in place. So we did that, and he submitted that. And he was saying, we'll see if that happens. And then about a month later, he said, we should talk, Bryan, because something was happening out west that was changing the equation. And it was the California Public Utilities Commission. They had made really drastic changes to residential rooftop solar and what residents could get back from the commission. And it basically reduced what they would get by 75%. And that was going into effect April 15th this year. So there was a big slowdown in solar production with that negative financial impact to rooftop solar in California. So there were a lot of safe harbored materials and stuff that couldn't get moved, and some equipment, some materials that were a few years older, that weren't as hot on the market. So Sean was able to come across materials that were about 50 cents to the dollar from when he bid a year earlier, which meant now he could have less sunken costs to putting the system in and then sell to East Central Energy at a lower rate, which then in turn they could sell to us at a lower rate. And so just like that, it seemed like the financial equation was going to work. And we wanted to be able to move fast enough on this so that Soltech could buy the panels and the inverters before somebody else did. And so we basically, had a handshake agreement that we're going to figure this out, go ahead and order the panels, and we'll get the PPA written up, and we'll make this happen. So Sean from Soltech ordered those. In the process, he also found out that he was getting the REAP grant, so that further lowered the cost, and that's funding from the Inflation Reduction Act. So those two components switched from something that didn't seem financially viable to now possible, and not only possible but beneficial to all three parties, because Soltech was going to be locking in guaranteed income for 30 years. East Central Energy was getting locally produced clean energy at a very attractive, affordable rate for their members. And then we were getting a rate that was very beneficial for us too, and locking that in for 30 years. So in June, the panels started arriving. You can see they're Hyundai panels. We stored those there for about 6 weeks. This is our prairie, where we had the 3-acre exclusion. Right over there, there's a couple of T-posts. That's part of the boundary on the Minnesota Conservation or Minnesota Land Trust Conservation Easement. So that area is actually this area. If you're driving in the driveway, you're seeing it on your left-hand side. I'm a little bit further down and looking back at it. So we had to mow the prairie, get that ready, take out the bluebird houses, and that's a little under a 3-acre section that was mowed down. Then they started putting in the racking, which was the longest time frame for the actual installation. The panels were just a couple days and they got those all up, but the racking and the wiring, that took the longest, but that was only about a week for them to do all that. With this being an old hay field, it made the install really easy because there weren't stumps, there weren't rocks. It was flat, south-facing, level, so they were able to just get to work. They didn't have to dig up any boulders along the way. And then the production started happening in terms of putting the whole system in place, starting to put the panels on. Those are 390-watt panels from Hyundai. They're considered kind of old now. They're made in 2019, and now the panels today are bigger and have more watts, but in terms of how much is produced, like on a square inch, it's basically the same. It's just it's a smaller panel than what a lot of commercial installers are moving towards. And so we got those all put in, and it took about 3 weeks for them to install the system. And then one of the things that made this possible and financially viable was that there was a phase 3 line just a few hundred feet away from this that East Central Energy had, so they could just bore underground, extend that out over to here, and it didn't have to be miles away. So that also lowered the cost, where that might not be an option everywhere you're looking for a solar project. And so this is what it looks like now. It's a 716 kilowatt system, 9 rows of panels, and 1,836 panels in total. And that's the first thing that people see now when they drive in, because our driveway comes in right here. You go through the old stone pillars. And that was a conscious choice of ours that if we were fortunate ever to get to the point to have this kind of production, we wanted a really strong first impression that people can see our values without having to be told anything, that we're serious about our commitment to the environment and to the climate. And so that's the bird's eye view of it. And that was the ribbon cutting last week. So on the left, that's Sean Markham. He's the CEO at Soltech. He's based out of Plymouth. That's Justin Johns. He's the CEO at East Central Energy. They're based out of Bryan and have a reach throughout East Central Minnesota. And then that's a board member of Osprey Wilds, Don Verbeek, who has been a board member since our first geothermal systems went in, and he's been just a stalwart for clean energy and helping us along the way, and was very instrumental in us getting to the finish line. So it was only fitting that he could do the ribbon cutting for us. And so the system is much bigger than I thought we would ever have, because my goal and our organization's goal was produce what we use. And for that, we needed about a 250 kilowatt system. But to make it economical for Sean, he wanted to have as big of a system as possible. So that's why it's 716 kilowatts. And that will produce about 1,000 megawatt hours of electricity a year, which is more than 3 times our need, because we need about 300,000. So that means that 70% of what's being produced is actually going to our neighbors right now at no additional cost, no effort on their end, and helping them, have cleaner homes. So we're in a 30-year agreement with Soltech for the land lease. We also have woven wire around it, so we can hopefully graze sheep in there and have agriculture and energy commingling. We're just really happy that we were able to find a way to make it work for all 3 parties. And so when everybody's feeling like it's a win, that's pretty cool. Excited to have reached this. So we've been able to get a little bit of press from different organizations, clean energy resource teams, fresh energy and climate generation. So if anyone wants to learn more about how we got here, you can take a look at those sites. And I think, if people are wondering, why do you do this? We already had things. I think until we're at net zero, our work isn't done. That should be our goal. We should not be emitting carbon, or at least producing as much as we emit. That's just our fundamental obligation, I feel, as responsible stewards of the planet and as an environmental education facility. So we want to mitigate the impacts of climate change. We don't want to wait till 2040 when Minnesota reaches its clean energy goal, because that's 16 years away. So why would we want to emit 16 years worth of emissions if we can do something about it? It also helps us financially with Sean and Soltech having the system ownership. We don't have to maintain it, which our facilities crew is appreciative of. And it allows us to be set up for expansion in the future with our campus, because we're not using all of this right now. And this was not our goal setting out, but just happened by the way the project finishes, that this is the largest PV system for any nature center in the country. And so we want to lead. We want to show what's possible and get other nature centers thinking about what they can do. And I will stop sharing, and happy to answer any questions that people have.
Hey, Bryan, this is Louis Asher. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Louis.
Oh, can I go ahead? Oh,
Yep, go ahead.
okay. I've got actually 3 questions. Number 1, solar panels have a life if I understand it, of 25 years, but you're talking about 30 years for your panels. Am I wrong about 25 years for solar panels?
Well, I'm not the expert on this whole team tonight, but I would say a lot of companies warranty for 25 years, and the panels themselves will degrade a little bit in production every year. But you could have panels that were installed in the 70s that are still producing now. It's just you won't
Oh,
get quite the production as the day they were going online.
okay, great, thank you. Then my second question is, tankless water heaters. My understanding is, educate me on this, that they plug up easier. Where I live in Venice Heights, we have hard water. Are they hard to maintain?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they take more effort than a standard reservoir heater. So what we need to do is we need to do an annual flushing of each of the tanks, which you wouldn't have to do with a regular tank water heater. So you need to just make sure that you have that maintenance schedule. We have well water, so we're kind of in that same boat. Um, but we have maintenance logs and we put those on our calendars so that we know, okay, every September or whatever month, we have to drain the tank, flush it, and make sure that we're getting rid of that mineral deposit. So in that sense, it is more work, but it's once a year, so it's manageable to us, and the energy savings, I think, outweigh
Okay.
that little inconvenience.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like bad at all. Thank you. My last question is, many years ago, my wife and I tried going to Audubon when he was of the north,
Mhm.
and the road was so washboardy
Hmm.
that we're afraid it's going to tear our wheels off. I'm assuming it's been fixed since that time, right? Then
Yeah, so we've made a lot of class 5 gravel upgrades over the last 5 years or so. And our norm is that whenever it rains, a good hard rain, that's when our road grader will come in and grade it. But when it's bone dry, um, it's it's too hard for the grader to go out there, and so that's unfortunately when it gets really washboardy too, and so you have to wait for that rain, and so you might have just had an unlucky day where it had been dry for several weeks, and that's when it keeps getting worse, and then you wait for that rainfall, and then we have our grader come out and get it nice and smooth.
okay, that explains quite a bit. Thank you very much. It was great presentation. I really appreciate all the work that's being done there. God bless all of you. I appreciate the reduction in carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Brian, did you guys do anything with like pollinator gardens under your panels or anything like that?
Good question. So what was under the garden was a tall grass prairie that we planted through an NRCS grant in 2004, which did have milkweed, bergamot, lots of goldenrod, and so that our plan is to let that grow as much as possible. But with the kind of chewing up of the ground that was with the installation. Um, we have a seed mix. It's from the Albert Lee Seed Company. It's their pollinator mix. So it's 75% prairie forbs and then 25% grasses. So that was all broadcast seed in. And we're looking forward to that coming up under the panels. We definitely want to continue to do that if it seems like there's chance for us to continue to add more forbs and make that really great pollinator habitat. The Monarch joint ventures coming up next summer to monitor and see if there what kind of monarch populations are there and get any recommendations from them on how we can improve that.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Chris, your
You're
mic.
muted.
It looked like your most recent solar installation is shaded either morning or afternoon by that trees. Is there a reason why you didn't move that farther out?
You are very observant.
Yeah, I noticed that
Oh,
too.
that was my question, Chris. Come on.
Oh, was
Oh,
it?
Mine too.
Yeah,
Oh,
from,
no.
yeah, right there. There's a little shading, and I would chalk that up to setting that 3 acre exclusion without being out there in the morning and
mm,
realizing that that shading was occurring. So the good and the bad of uh, doing a conservation easement is when you make those exclusions and the easement itself, it's permanent. So that's a really good thing because nobody can come along and change it. But when we were looking at this system and realizing, oh, there's shade here, we couldn't move it either. And when I was thinking of a 250 kilowatt system, um, that wouldn't have been an issue because we could have put the whole system over here and it
Yeah.
not
mhm.
so if I could do it over again, that's the one thing I do. I'd shift this a little bit further to the west so
Yeah.
that it's 100% solar uh, the whole time.
Well, those panels will last longer, right?
They'll
And
last a long time.
the
Yep.
ones in the shade, they won't get used. So,
Yeah, those will be good pan. That'll be the good part, right?
Yep.
yeah, push them over. The
Yeah.
other side.
So,
We
so
did
Brian,
talk
I've
with
got,
our solar company about, do you want us to take out those trees? And they said no. So we didn't.
No.
yeah, okay. So Brian, my other question I had was just curious back to the actual, work that you do every day with students. I mean, I've had experiences at a similar nature or school,
Mhm.
Camp St. Croix when my
Sure.
now adult children were in grade school and had fond memories there. But what would you say is like the students' kind of like favorite thing that they they really gravitate towards and maybe it's a seasonal thing because maybe you do different things obviously in the winter than you might do in the spring or
Mhm.
the fall. But what do they really love when they go up there?
This is a great question. I would say there are a few that consistently are right at the top, and then obviously each school there might be, differences. Um, Kids love doing our stream invertebrate class, so they get dip nets, they get rubber boots, they get into
Mm,
Windmill Creek, and they're just blown away by all the stuff that's living in those creeks. They scoop it up, go back, and they find caddisfly nymphs, and they find bloodworms, and they find stonefly larvae, and just thinking that wow, all these things are alive, and when you just go look at a creek, you don't see that.
right.
So that's really cool to see them looking down and engaging in that. Another big highlight for a lot of students is doing our high ropes course. So we have a 2 level high ropes course with a zip line, and that's a really good personal challenge thing for them that not all of them are sure that they can do it. And so it's a confidence builder for them and fun to go down the zip line.
Cool.
And then I would say in spring, maple
Yeah.
syruping is a neat class for them because we cook it the old way on a wood-fired evaporator, and so they
Yeah,
get to
nice.
tap, they get to collect, they get to see it cook down and walk in and have all that like maple steam wafting over you. It's a pretty cool sensory experience.
My favorite activity at Camp St. Croix was the Predator Prey game. Do you
Oh
guys
yeah, yep.
play that? And we were always there in the winter time, so there was, usually snow, and I don't know.
Mhm.
I had a blast playing that game with the kids.
That is a fun game. Yep, we have herbivores, omnivores, and predators in that, and yep, some people really get excited to go hunt down their classmates.
Well, now we had, after Hunger, we didn't have the Hunger Games back then,
Yeah,
so fortunately, it's a little different theme than the Hunger Games. But
yep. And then you
anyway,
also
thank you. Yeah,
for the really good hiders in the group that are trying to hide and be
right.
the prey. So yeah, it's a fun one.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, I'm just curious. A guy that we've gotten to know over the years, Will Steger, has a real
Hmm.
strong opinion about the fact that education or meetings or anything are so much more productive when they're held out in nature. Do you support that idea? Because you guys sure are doing that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm familiar with Will's Wilderness Center up in Ely, and been fortunate to get to visit with him multiple times over the years. I would say that nature is a really good leveling field. You know, when everybody's outside, it strips away a lot of the perceived differences amongst us. We're all experiencing the same weather, the same conditions. We're in the same environment, and I think there's you just recognize the shared humanity in people more. We see that schools and kids are a lot closer when they leave after 3 days than when they got there. They're closer with each other, having gone through those outdoor experiences, having eaten, slept in rooms together. They see their teachers in a different light. So I would definitely say, from personal experience and professional experience, that when you're spending time outside with other people, the bond you form is so much faster and deeper than sitting in a stale indoor space. You
Mm.
just,
Yeah.
there's a lot
Just
to
Brian, out of curiosity, I volunteered when I was working for the power company with Camp Sunrise over on the St. Croix. And did you ever know about that organization? I mean, they were there for about 45 years, and about 300 kids per summer came up there. And what I was fascinated with is just what you just said, is that I mean, it's just, I could not believe how those kids changed in 1 week. They were, we'd bring them up on a Saturday and take them back on a Saturday. And
Mhm.
they were, low income kids, and Martin Luther Center and Minneapolis Library were our pickup points. And it just, I mean, I was a counselor for a couple of years, and then I got involved with them much more and on the board and all that stuff. But the change was amazing. It
Yeah,
really was.
it is. I didn't have any time with Camp Sunrise, but what you're sharing is definitely something that I think a lot of us outdoor organizations it resonates, and something that we've seen that it's consistent that you get people outside for extended times, and something magical happens and something touches them that can really change what they do, and how they find enjoyment or solitude or peace moving forward for the rest of their lives. So we're that's a really beautiful thing with being an overnight facility, is we can have groups come for a few hours, and we do, but to be able to provide a space for students, families, adults to stay for, 3 nights to a week, or sometimes with our J-term college course for 2 weeks, that is really impactful. And to, get testimonials and hear from the individuals, that's really rewarding stuff and keeps you going. I'm like, yeah, this is important work that we're doing and necessary work that we're doing.
Yeah, we ended up with one of the big focuses was the multicultural side of it. And this was many years ago. Now it's become more, the thing to do, but it was just amazing. And I mean, people, some of the kids would come up with a friend, but we always, split up the crews and then, mix the different people together, and it just yeah, it was just amazing how it all turned out. So the other question I wanted to ask you is there is a educational center similar to yours down in Lanesboro. Are you familiar with those guys and with Joe down there and well, Joe's retired now, but
Yeah.
with how many of those are in Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm
Like,
definitely familiar with Eagle Bluff, which is the organization you're referring to, and their executive director, Colleen. We're good friends. Yeah, all of us are pulling for each other, trying to help raise the field. We feel like a rising tide lifts all boats. So a lot of the funding, the legislation, like, we're doing that all collectively. So it's not just Osprey Wilds, it's Osprey Wilds, it's Eagle Bluff, it's Wolf Ridge, it's Long Lake, it's Deep Portage. Those are the 5 accredited outdoor schools that are in the state, which is really unique for a state to have 5 of those. And we're the only accredited schools in the country as outdoor learning centers. So we work together very closely, and we just feel like we can accomplish more when we work together.
Do you guys, that was one other question I had. Do you guys get a lot of, questions from other places around the country? I mean, it sounds like you're absolutely a national leader with this type of thing.
Yeah, we do. There's an organization called the Association of Nature Center Administrators, which is kind of a mouthful, but the acronym is ANCA, and that's an organization for leaders and directors of nature centers, of outdoor learning centers across the country. And there's a lot of back and forth of sharing and exchanging ideas and learning from others. And I know that yeah, people look to Minnesota to see what we're doing, and we look to other states as well, and try to just share what's working and how we can make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I was just noting how holistic your whole approach is. I mean, over time you've evolved and have this real systemic approach that I'm sure you probably expound on that with the students. I mean, do they understand how everything is kind of working together with the land and the ground source heat and your all of your efficiency and um, waste reduction and the renewables and it all nests together and so critical. And your mission also really looks like your values look like the Audubon Society's mission in a way also. I remember they had a goal at one point years ago when I worked with them about creating so many thousand Audubon centers across the country, believing how important it was to get kids out in nature. I wonder if they had to abandon that, because of the cost.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for your questions and comments, Chris. Your first question about the students kind of get the holistic approach. We certainly hope so. And when a school arrives, the first thing we do is they get oriented, they have lunch, and then for the first 2 hours, it's really an introduction class where they get to learn about the organization, learn about our conservation initiatives, learn about the campus and the property, so they start feeling comfortable. And then from there, they're going to have usually 5 other 2-hour classes, 2 evening programs that'll be a mix of various things that will touch on environmental topics. With the farm, we really talk about that at our meals, about where our food's coming from. And we have a little chart that shows, hey, your radishes, your lettuce, your peppers are from our farm today, or your beef is, or whatever. And the role that food plays in carbon emissions, and how, your food's coming from a quarter of a mile away as opposed to 2,000 miles away, and what that means. And then we have them weigh their food waste and chart that. And we want them to think
Wow.
about that, and that, yes, we'll compost the food waste, but let's not waste it to begin with. Let's be mindful about what we're taking. And because a lot of food waste doesn't get composted, and then it breaks down in landfills and releases methane. And, it's just a lot of sunken energy into something that never gets enjoyed. So we want them to be thinking of that as well. And they're turning the lights off when you go out of a room, and how long does your shower really need to be, those kinds of things.
That's great.
So Bryan, one last comment, I guess. You were talking about getting students, kids out in nature, and Doug, you were also commenting on that, about how it changes them. And so, Bryan, when you opening up your center to, like, the state legislature or Congress, seems like there would be a good time to get some people together to
Yeah.
figure things out and realize we're all in this together.
Yeah, I think so. We would love to do that. I think there's so much more that we all have in common than what separates us or perceived separates us. We're all the same people deep down, and sometimes I think we forget that. And being outdoors really can help remind you of that, the humanity of people. And we're fortunate that we've had both of our state legislators out, Senator Jason Rarick and Representative Nathan Nelson. They're both co-authors on the Outdoor School for All bill, so we're very grateful for their support, and they believe in the power of getting kids outside and support that. And then we were lucky to have a staff member from Senator Tina Smith's office at our ribbon cutting, and just their support of what we're doing. So that's across both sides of the aisle at the state and the federal level. And yeah, if we can be any part of that to just find common ground about our planet and kids and education, we want to be a part of that.
Well, you certainly have the educational model to do it. So you guys are doing awesome work up there. So thank you.
You
See, Bryan, I have been fortunate to bring students up from Avalon School to your center. Prior to 2020, we would do our service week with you.
Yeah.
Fix fences, put in docks, and whatever you needed help with. And it was always one of the best places to go, and we really appreciated it. They were able to help with your rain garden and actually feel like they were doing something.
Yeah. Sometimes helping from children, is maybe not as helpful as you think, but I'm glad that you felt like that was helpful, and that's great that they were able to do that service learning.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I was up there through the Hamlin environmental education program as well. I think you were teaching the class, and you talked somebody into petting a bumblebee that then
Yeah.
stung them.
That was probably the biomes class. Yep. That was probably at Sherburne Wildlife Refuge. It's
Right.
a pretty cool thing that the gentle giants, you can pet them on the flower. And that's
Yes, but don't put them on your hand. That's what the
don't put
gentleman
them in your
did.
hand. Yeah.
He put them on his hand. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. That's great to know you've been up there with students.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Bryan, any chance of doing a geodesic dome? I used to belong to a group called WindStar in headquartered in Colorado, and the geodesic dome was just, to me, they had a 3-level one. Some guy named Buckminster Fuller helped us build it, and it was just. And there are those type of small units now available. I've been talking to a couple of schools in St. Paul where it, provides another spot for year-round education, and runs on a lot of solar and passive and what have you. Have you guys even thought about that particular thing?
I have not looked into that at all, but I wrote it down, so I'm gonna take a look at that.
I will send you a name of a company. They're also in Colorado that actually builds those domes in components, and then they will ship them to you, and then you get volunteers to put them together, or they come and help. And there's various sizes, really quite large, and all the way down to very small ones. So
Cool. Yeah, sounds interesting.
yeah, it might be worth a consideration at least.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for the tip.
Any other questions? Patrick, got any thoughts? I talked to Patrick today. I told him I thought he'd be interested in this presentation because he's a real solar advocate in every which way. Is there any other type of energy sources that you guys are looking at? I mean, is anybody thinking at all? I mean, what about battery storage, and what about hydrogen and things like that? Is there any thought with those?
Well, I think with the advent now of this big solar PV system that has this bank of solar produced electricity, my thought now is to try to get away from any combustion that we have on campus. So we have 3 smaller buildings that have propane furnaces. I would very much like to shift those to a heat pump model, everything running on electricity eventually would be my goal, because we have this large system. The tankless water heaters, although they're more efficient, those are also propane. So I'd like to shift to, electric water heaters, or, at my home, I have a hybrid heat pump electric water heater, which is very efficient. So that I know is where we want to go to get to be a combustion-free campus overall. I haven't looked at hydrogen or battery storage. With us having a PPA with East Central Energy, I don't know that battery storage is in the cards for that big system. That would need to be something separate and maybe at our different campus. So,
Do you ever have power outages with East Central?
well, I've worked there since 2007, and the longest we've ever been without power was about 40 minutes. Otherwise,
Okay.
all the electric wires are underground for us, so we have very rare power outages, which I'm very thankful for.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I know Will Steger, his whole system up there, he's building a microgrid and, with all kinds of backup. So anyway, I'd talk to you a long time here, but anybody else got some questions for Bryan? We got about 3 minutes left. Peter?
Okay, question briefly. Racial diversity, getting a lot of it among students there?
Yes. So for students that visit us at Osprey Wilds, about 40% of the students last year were students of color, and a large percentage were free and reduced price meals. So we definitely work with a lot of diverse schools. Some of those are our charter schools, which have a majority of students of color. And that's really a focus of ours, is to make the outdoors as accessible as possible for all kids. It shouldn't matter what zip code you are, what school district you go to. So we make concerted efforts to reach out to schools on a consistent basis to share what we're doing, and share that if they would need financial assistance, that we can offer that to them. And yeah, it's very cool to see students of all backgrounds on a consistent weekly basis up at Osprey Wilds, getting sometimes that very first exposure to nature as a 5th or 6th or 7th grader, and that can make a big difference for them.
Okay.
Bryan, any connection with Native American group Dream of Wild? No, boy, Dream of Wild Health, I think it's called. They're just down the road from you ways on the east side of the freeway.
We don't have a connection with them. We do have a connection with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've worked with the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe before.
Yeah, we've got a guy that's very active in solar. And I know we're running out of time here, but one more quick question. Transportation is kind of the other major issue with pollution. EVs, anything like that that you guys are looking at?
Yeah, that is another component to carbon emissions, is EVs. So we installed 4 Tier 2 electric charging stations at our parking lot 2 years ago. And we don't charge for those. So anybody that wants to come with an EV, you can charge up and walk our trails or come for a program. Our fleet right now runs on gas, but that would be something I want, as we can transition our educational vehicle fleet over to electric vans and cars. And then something that's coming down the road that we want to take advantage of and share is that the Northern Lights passenger rail, that will be coming soon, maybe in a couple of years, and we're going to have a drop-off point at Hinckley and or Sandstone. So that's 10 miles away. So for people that don't have personal transportation, we can be a site for them, that if they can get to the railway station in the Twin Cities, they can get up there, and then we can do some shuttle service to get them out. so that we can, again, make that more accessible, and not having a vehicle isn't a limitation to getting that kind of nature experience.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, any final questions? I got tons of them, but I don't want to, we've tied it up enough. So, Bryan, thank you so much. As was said earlier, your presentation is fantastic and very timely. I mean, almost to the minute. You were, you were right on that. So thank you so very much. And I know I'll be up there, and I can see Tim thinking about it now that you've got a charging station for his
Oh,
car.
yeah. Right.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure to be with you this evening. If any of you want a tour of our energy, you can get my contact info from Doug, or just go onto our website and reach out. And I appreciate all that all of you do for trying to get us to a more sustainable society and future. Kudos to all of you.
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah,
Thanks a whole
appreciate it.
lot.